This is a Dodge Cummins 12 valve. I'm in the process of removing the cylinder head. So with the head off, that will give me an initial look at the cylinders. Hopefully they all look pretty good. Some of the things that have been already removed are the alternator and the turbo and those heat pipes that run along the top here that go to the heater core, and also disconnected the return line for the injectors. So the fuel filter used to sit here. So this engine has 6 head bolts per cylinder. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And between the cylinders it shares this one. So 6 for this one as well, but it's sharing that one. So I want to keep the rockers and the push rods all organized. I don't want to mix them around. Later on, I don't want these rockers with this cylinder and these push rods with another cylinder, and all nicely organized. They develop a wear pattern. Each individual push rod develops its own wear pattern to the lifter and also to the rocker itself. So I decided to not use the impact wrench on these head bolts to loosen them off. So I'll just get them loose by hand. I think I've got all the head bolts loose now. And then I want to put the rockers away in order on the workbench. So this is the front of the engine. I'll call this rocker number 1. So arrow pointing to the front. So because of the shape of the push rod, it's pretty easy to tell which is up and down, but I still don't want to mix them up with other lifters and rockers. So I'm going to start putting them away on the workbench here as well. Now I'll gather up some head bolts, and then this head should actually be ready to come off of there. Got the engine hoist hooked up to the cylinder head, so get to find out here shortly, get an idea on what the cylinders look like. And I think I'm going to leave the exhaust manifold on. These rusty old bolts, I suspect that there's going to be some broken ones when I start to pull these bolts off, if I would choose to do that. So I'm kind of thinking, well, the manifold is not cracked. There's no pressing reason for me to pull it off. So to save the trouble of potentially having broken bolts here on the manifold, I'm just going to leave it in place. The only thing is, I think it would be more user-friendly if the manifold was off, like to tip the head like this and kind of set it on a workbench. So I don't know yet, but maybe I'll make a little stand that kind of holds the manifold like this, maybe in 2 spots, and then like with maybe some cross legs, so that the head could still sit up like that on a workbench. I don't know, I guess I'll sort of make that up as I go along. some good news and some bad news. The good news is the tops of the pistons look to be in very good condition, all 6 of them. Some bad news is there's some corrosion happening. So that's not a sign of, like what I really didn't want to see. Well, I didn't want to see rust either, but when that piston starts to score up real bad, broken rings and that kind of thing, and debris from the piston and rings starting to gouge around in the cylinder, that makes a lot of damage. So in here as well, you can see some crosshatch there. See that? And I'll just check for a ridge on these cylinders. The piston rings, they don't go all the way to the top. So then the cylinder wears where the ring goes, but right at the very top where the ring doesn't travel, it will create a ridge on a worn cylinder. So it looks like there's a ridge there, but it's more like carbon. Because when I try and feel for a ridge there, basically there is nothing there. And evidence of a cylinder that hasn't worn is the fact that there's crosshatch in the bore. There's crosshatch there. Probably all of these cylinders I can find some crosshatch. This one has crosshatch here. Okay, so I'm going to turn this engine over a little, and then I want to have a look at the outside, the 2 outside cylinders. So to turn this engine over, I suppose that if I would go and get myself a pipe wrench and put it right on this surface here where the seal runs and start turning the engine with a pipe wrench, I would speculate that that type of activity would create a very busy comment section. So I'm just messing with you guys. I'm not going to put a pipe wrench on there. But what I will use is this tool here. So a 1/2-inch drive, and the Cummins, the 12 valve Cummins here. This fits in here. And the other side, you can see it's mates up with that flywheel. So the other day I was actually thinking, oh, I'll pull that flywheel off already, and now I'm kind of glad I just left it on there. So the 2 outside cylinders, they don't seem to show the rust like some of the other ones did. But also these pistons were basically to the top, which I think shielded those cylinders from the environment. And so what's happening here, I think, is it's an engine that sits for extended periods of time. Cold climate, humid climate, heating, warming, where the engine just sits without turning over. Humidity, condensation gets into the bores. So there's no sign here that the head gasket had a failure. It looks pretty ugly and dirty. So later on in the disassembly process, I'd like to also remove these frost plugs, and so that they can also be replaced. But when the frost plugs are out, I would like to take the pressure washer and spend some time in trying to wash out the water jacket. So anyways, guys, so thanks for checking in. There's another video, and hope you didn't find too boring.